This week, the Pittsburgh Steelers seek their revenge versus the Cincinnati Bengals after losing to them 33-31 on Thursday Night Football a few weeks back. And the big question is, can the Steelers stop Ja'Marr Chase? Welcome into the Steelers Talk Week 11 preview. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we will be going live for this game. It all starts on Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We got an hour-long pregame show followed by live play-by-play and analysis of the game itself, and then our extensive post-game reaction coverage as well. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already to never miss any of our videos here on Steelers Talk. They're all 100% free. We try to give you guys free, daily, and informative Steelers content on this channel. Okay, so now let's get into this matchup here. The 3-6 Bengals traveling to Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh on Sunday afternoon to take on the 5-4 Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers have lost 3 of their last 4 after starting 4-1. One of those games was to these Cincinnati Bengals back in Week 7. You guys can take a look at the Bengals' schedule to this point. I mean, they started the season off 2-0, then Joe Burrow gets injured, and then the only game that they've won since then was against the Pittsburgh Steelers, unfortunately, where Joe Flacco and Ja'Marr Chase absolutely destroyed this Steelers team. They're currently sitting with a 3-6 record and are third in the AFC North. But they've lost to bad teams like the Jets, and frankly, they have played some good teams. Like, they've played Green Bay and they've played Detroit and Denver. You probably expected them to lose those games. But they've had some real heartbreakers over the last 2 versus the Jets and the Bears, respectively. But before those 2 games, they ended up beating the Pittsburgh Steelers back in Week 7 on Thursday Night Football, where Joe Flacco and Ja'Marr Chase absolutely went off. Chase had 23 targets, 16 receptions, over 160 yards, and a touchdown. Joe Flacco, if Joe Flacco's throwing the ball 47 times, the Bengals should not win that football game. Unfortunately, the Steelers' defense did not come to play. Now, the Steelers' defense, at least from a personnel standpoint, does look a little bit different now, and they've been playing better since the Steelers' defense really struggled in that 2-game stretch where they played the Bengals and the Packers. But Aaron Rodgers probably had his best game of his Steelers tenure versus that Bengals defense. So over 240 yards passing with 4 touchdowns, and it was just a terrific day. Jaylen Warren had over 120 yards rushing. So certainly the offense did their job versus this Bengals defense last time. The question is, can the defense turn it around and play a good game here in Week 11 and have a better game plan? And something that should help that out is that once again, Joe Burrow and Trey Hendrickson are likely to be out for the Cincinnati Bengals in this football game. Both these guys missed the previous game, so you might be saying at home, well, Jack, these guys missed the last game and it didn't matter. Why would it matter this time? I'll tell you guys why later in today's show. But it certainly seems like Joe Burrow, who is now off the IR, certainly hoping that the Cincinnati Bengals can get this win and stay alive in the AFC North. This is what Burrow had to say in his press conference this week. Our division is wide open. I think Pittsburgh's 5-4 at this point. We play them this week. Everything is still there in front of us. Very rare that our division looks like this, but it does this year, and so I think we'll at least be in it until the end. And I want the Pittsburgh Steelers this weekend, guys, to make Joe Burrow eat those words. I want the Pittsburgh Steelers at home to absolutely destroy the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow's hopes of making the NFL postseason this year. Burrow said in that same press conference that they got to win the division in order to make the playoffs likely this year. So if the Pittsburgh Steelers can handle their business this week, get to 6-4, and kind of bury the Cincinnati Bengals, that would be very good for the Pittsburgh Steelers this week and would certainly bring a little bit of joy to my heart. But you guys can take a look here and we can dive in to the Cincinnati Bengals coaching and scheme breakdown. Zach Taylor is their head coach. The fact that he's been to a Super Bowl and he has had the luxury of having a guy as talented as Joe Burrow at quarterback, and he's got a sub-500 record as a head coach is pretty embarrassing. He does call the plays offensively here in Cincinnati. They run a modern pro spread offense, lots of shotgun, all that sort of stuff. And then on defense, Al Golden, their new defensive coordinator this year, runs a 4-2 nickel base split safety defense that can certainly be exploited via the run. And you guys can take a look at the offensive ranks, and honestly, they got an okay offense, so at least in certain things. They do have quite a few turnovers. 14 is quite a bit this season. But in terms of the efficiency numbers, they're around league average to slightly below league average in most of these categories. They're pretty good situationally. They're top 10 in red zone and they're top 15 in third down. So it's not like this offense is absolutely terrible. And certainly Joe Flacco has been pretty decent for this team ever since they traded for him about a month ago. And you guys can take a look at their roster. Of course, Joe Flacco will be their starting quarterback this weekend. Orlando Brown, Zeus Brown is their left tackle. Dalton Reisner is their left guard. Ted Karras is their longtime starting center. Jalen Rivers, a rookie right guard that's really struggling right now. And then you got young right tackle Amarius Mims on the right side as well. But then at the skill position players, this is really where, the Bengals make their money, because you got Jamar Chase, one of the best receivers in the game today. T. Higgins, one of the best number 2 receivers in the game today as well. Andre Yoshivas certainly is a decent number 3 option for them. Noah Fant is their tight end, with Chase Brown, who had a big game against the Steelers back in Week 7. As their running back. But then you look at the defensive side of the ball, and make no bones about it, guys. This is the worst defense in the National Football League this year. They are dead last in scoring off defense. They're dead last in total defense. All right, they're dead last in yards per play efficiency. They're dead last in EPA per play efficiency. This is the worst defense in the National Football League by the numbers. And it's not even like they can really hang their hat on takeaways, which they really do, because they're 23rd, and that's their best ranking in terms of the metrics that you look at when you look at team defense. But plain simply, guys, this is the worst defense in the National Football League. The Steelers offense needs a get-right game, and if there's any defense in the league that you can play to, get back on the right track and get your mojo going, it's against the Cincinnati Bengals, so that's some good news. If you're a Steelers fan, you can take a look at their roster here. Without Trey Hendrickson, you got Miles Murphy and Joseph Asai as their defensive ends. Those two guys are fine, but they're nothing special. Then you got B.J. Hill and T.J. Slayton, who will be starting on the interior for them. At off-ball linebacker, they got 2 very young players, Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter. Honestly, this has been one of the worst linebacker rooms in the National Football League this year. It's really a big weakness for this defense. And then in the secondary, I'd say they've got some decent players here. DJ Turner has really turned into a legitimate number 1 corner, in my opinion. Dax Hill's a decent nickel. Cam Taylor-Britt's not great, but he's fine as a number 2 starting corner. Geno Stone is an okay free safety. I would say this is probably the best group that they've got on this defense, and it's not even that great. So that certainly says something about the talent level that the Cincinnati Bengals are working with on defense this year. Now, still to come here on the Steelers Talk Preview here for Week 11. I got my keys to victory versus the Cincinnati Bengals this week, and then I've got my Week 11 score prediction. I'm going to let you guys know if I think the Steelers get their revenge and split the season series with the Pussycats here. But before we get into the rest of this week's preview, let's have a word from our sponsor today, where you guys can go to chatsports.com/PittSalute25 if you guys want the limited edition Pittsburgh Steelers Salute to Service hoodie, officially licensed by the National Football League. I really like the design of this year's hoodie, guys, because usually they go pretty heavy with the camo, but I'm not really a camo guy, but I'm really a big fan of Army Green, and, of course, they've got the great American flag logo patch there on the right sleeve. You got the Steelers logo patch on the chest. I just think it's a really simplistic, very modern, very stylish design that you can wear pretty much any time of the year. It's not like you have to wear it hunting or something like that, like some of the previous Salute to Service hoodies that have come out. You guys can wear this anytime. I think it's a very stylish look, and it's really timeless. So, absolutely, this is something that you can keep in your closet for a long time. So go to chatsports.com/PittSalute25 to get this awesome Steelers sweatshirt in your collection today. All right, so now let's get into our keys to victory this week for the Steelers to get this victory in Week 11. The first thing that the Steelers need to do is not give Joe Flacco any easy answers, okay? Because last game versus the Steelers, Flacco, completely balled out. Over 340 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, didn't have an interception. Flacco played one of the best games of his career against the Steelers defense. And a big reason for that is that the Steelers would allow very, very quick passes from Flacco, all right? They would allow these quick slants to Jamar Chase, and, they would, and frankly, Flacco played really well. He deserves his credit for making some of the great plays and throws that he made, and he was super efficient, didn't make mistakes. And the Steelers paid the price for that, but they also made things a lot easier than they probably should have for Joe Flacco. He can't move in the pocket, so the number one priority for the Steelers has to be to take away those underneath quick passes and force Flacco to hold the ball for longer than he did in the first matchup. If they do that, hopefully the Steelers pass rush can get home, and hopefully that forces a few more mistakes out of Joe Flacco. But a big way to take away those easy answers for Joe Flacco is to take away Jamar Chase. And the way you do that is to double team him. Last time that the Steelers played the Bengals, they only truly double teamed him twice the entire game. That is unacceptable for a player of the caliber of Jamar Chase. And, last game they tried to put Jalen Ramsey on him one-on-one, and Ramsey's just not that guy anymore. Let's just be real, all right? He's just not somebody that can go up against a legit number one receiver like Jamar Chase and hold up in man-to-man coverage anymore. He's much better suited as a safety, which I think is going to be something that gives the Steelers maybe a winning edge in this one, is that he's actually going to be playing in the right position for him against this Bengals defense. And, I think that, outside of Joey Porter Jr., there's nobody on this team that can even think about guarding Jamar Chase one-on-one. And frankly, Joey Porter Jr. would take his losses against Chase as well. So because you can't get anybody to line up one-on-one to him, you either have to play zone or you have to double him. And I think the best way to handle him is to double him, whether he lines up in the slot, outside, give him safety help, whoever's guarding him safety help. Because last time, 23 targets, that didn't happen by accident. The Bengals pretty much knew what the Steelers were going to run, and they knew how to get Jamar Chase open against those looks, and it ended up with a 161-yard performance. That cannot be repeated if the Steelers want to win this game. But then, when it comes to what the Steelers should do schematically on defense, they should base out of two high structures pre-snap. Now, the Steelers have been doing this more over the last 2 weeks with Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar playing safety, and this is exactly why you play these two guys at safety, because I think they're both really good playing that kind of quarters alignment, kind of that, not true deep safeties, but kind of that quarters alignment where you're closer to the line of scrimmage. Use Ramsey and Duggar in the run fit because they're both excellent run defenders, big body guys that can take on blocks. They're really good tacklers out in space, and I think that's what gives the Steelers their winning edge. And then when you have those two high safety structures with these two guys playing deep, it kind of keeps what the Steelers defense is running ambiguous to Joe Flacco. So this is going to be a big part of how the Steelers can get Joe Flacco to hang on to the ball for a little bit longer, because if he has to read the defense post-snap more often than not, he's not going to be able to just raise up and throw that quick slant or throw that quick flat route to Jamar Chase. Because he has to, read what the defense is shifting to post-snap. So I think basing out of that two high safety look with Ramsey and Duggar will be a big key to victory for the Pittsburgh Steelers in this one. And of course, when you play too high and, you're not disguising a blitz, that means that you are going to be rushing with four and you're not going to be blitzing. And the Steelers have certainly been blitzing less over the last 2 weeks, and that has been a good thing. The pass rush has been more successful, not less, because the Steelers are only sending 4 rushers. And guys, I've been saying it all season. The reason why you pay TJ Watt, the reason why you pay Alex Highsmith, the reason why you invest a first-round pick in a defensive tackle in Derek Harmon, the reason why you give Cam Hayward those extra incentives this year is because you want to win with 4. That's the advantage that, these talented pass rushers give to this defense. Bad teams with bad, pass rushers that can't win with 4 have to blitz to get pressure. We're probably going to see quite a bit of blitzing from the Cincinnati Bengals defense this week because they stink. The Pittsburgh Steelers pass rush doesn't stink. So, what stinks about this defense, or at least what the weakness is their pass coverage. So what makes sense is you put more bodies out into coverage to give your guys, to give quarterbacks kind of tighter windows, have more bodies out in coverage, and this pass rush has certainly proved that they can still win after just rushing just 4. But then also, a big part of the loss versus Cincinnati a few weeks ago was that they couldn't stop the run and Chase Brown. And I think that this week a big key to victory is to avenge the run defense. And of course, after that game, the Steelers' run defense has been a lot better. Now, they gave up almost 100 yards to Kamani Vidal last week, but they shut down Josh Jacobs and they shut down Jonathan Taylor in back-to-back weeks. After giving up 127 yards rushing to Chase Brown. back in Week 7. So hopefully this week the Steelers have a better game plan. And frankly, it's just execution on that. In that kind of area of their defense. Patrick Queen needs to fill his run fits. The safety play should be better in run defense this week than what it was back in Week 7. But certainly that's going to be something that the Steelers need to do in order to stop the Cincinnati Bengals offensive attack. Then on offense, I think you want to get the run game rolling more than it has the last couple of weeks, all right? Even in the game that they won versus the Indianapolis Colts, the run game did not have a great day. And then against the Chargers, the first half, they couldn't really get the run game going. They got it going a little bit in the second half. Jaylen Warren was by far their best player in that loss to the Chargers last week. But I want to see Warren get off to a fast start in this game. He had over 120 yards rushing last game versus the Cincinnati Bengals. He has absolutely killed the Bengals throughout his Steelers career. And hopefully Isaac Seumalo is going to be able to go this week, which would open up the jumbo personnel packages that the Steelers love to run. And hopefully the Steelers run game can get back to playing good football because they've taken a step back the last 2 weeks. And then when it comes to Aaron Rodgers in the passing game, I'm just hoping that A-Rod can get his mojo back. I'm hoping that Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to bounce back. Obviously, last week was a big outlier performance in terms of Aaron Rodgers just not looking like himself. I think that, last time they played the Cincinnati Bengals, he played phenomenally. He probably played his best game as a Pittsburgh Steeler, over 67% completion percentage with 250 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. Especially with how much this defense is struggling in Cincinnati, I'm really looking forward to seeing what A-Rod is going to be able to do here in Week 11, because you know that he is going to be laser sharp focused to try and get this offense back on track after having his worst game as a Steeler last week versus the Chargers. And then, my final key to victory here, guys, for this team is to play the cleaner game. When the Steelers turn the football over, when they're not turning the other team over, when they're committing penalties, all this different stuff, they're beating themselves essentially, that's when they lose ball games, okay? But when they protect the football, when they take the football away, that's when they're winning football games. And we've seen the Steelers team beat really good playoff caliber teams this year. They had the game locked up midway through the fourth quarter against the number 1 seed in the AFC right now, the Indianapolis Colts. All right, they had they beat the New England Patriots, a team that is red hot right now on the road, okay? But you got to play the cleaner game. If you do that, I think the Steelers should have a pretty darn good chance of winning this ball game. Now, in terms of the trends, okay, you cross-reference the points per game averages on offense and defense for these two football teams. The trends would predict a 28-24 Steelers win. The margin of error is 3 points, so the Steelers are the clear favorite heading into this ball game, especially because they are home, and I agree with that. And the trends only predict a 4-point victory, but I'm going to go with a whopping 3-score deficit for the Pittsburgh Steelers this weekend. I think the defense is playing a lot better than where this defense was just a few weeks ago when they played the Bengals back in Week 7. So I think that the Bengals will score less. I think they'll have a better game plan to go up against Jamar Chase and Joe Flacco. I think they'll put Flacco on the ground more often. They'll get more stops. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I still think Aaron Rodgers is capable of putting together a hell of a performance against a really, really bad Cincinnati Bengals defense. I think Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers, they're going to want to put the pedal to the metal in this game, not take any chances, and really prove to the world that this group is capable of putting up a lot of points. And I think he's going to do it. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to have a big bounce-back performance. I think we're going to feel very good about this football team coming out of Sunday's matchup. Hopefully I'm right about that, but I guess we'll have to see come Sunday. So it's your turn. Let me know down there in the comment section. Predict the score of Steelers versus Bengals this week. I got 38-20. Steelers win in a huge bounce-back victory. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for this week's preview here on Steelers Talk. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for all of our weekly in-depth game previews for the black and gold. Of course, we have our watch parties. We'll be going live at 12 p.m. Eastern Time this Sunday for this week's watch party and all of our post-game reactions as well. You guys can check out our instant reaction to the Chargers loss after today's show. I'll put the chip to that one in the top right. But that'll be it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much for all of your support. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers.